Okay, perfect. Well, we'll get started here too. So we're kind of about 18 months since ChatGPT dropped on everyone, and it is changing education pretty radically. We want to start thinking beyond just ChatGPT, though, and how AI is affecting things. We had two really big announcements last week from OpenAI and Google too, about new products that are going to probably change how we deal with some of these tools in the fall. And we'll kind of talk about that here as part of the actual presentation. But really what I'm going to talk about is maybe the possibility of why you all are sitting here right now too, is rethinking professional development, what that's going to mean now in our new AI era. With these tools keep on iterating in public very quickly, it is challenging to keep up with them. It's challenging to design our curriculum to take account what new skills students will need to have, and also what existing skills we would like to keep AI at bay with or to limit in some way, shape, or form. So I think we really want to think about how this is changing things and go beyond just ChatGPT. So we'll get started here. We got some clips to show you too, some recent updates, but there are some big changes coming this fall, and some of them are out right now. So just last week, OpenAI released GPT-4o for Omni. So it's their newest model to date, and it's very advanced. It's even better than their paid for professional model GPT-4. What makes this a little bit more interesting and makes my heart kind of skip beats a little bit, gives me some palpitations here, is they're committed to replacing the free version of ChatGPT with this model. So that means that come fall, our students and everyone else who has access to the free model will be automatically upgraded to the free version of ChatGPT using this GPT-4o model. And it's very good, and it is fully multimodal, which is very different from what we've had to deal with before in the past, including streaming video and audio. So it's going to be live audio and video that you can actually talk with, and the AI can then see the person or use vision to look at the person who's talking to. So a lot of hype last week, a lot of breathless expectation about how this is going to change teaching and learning. It's also going to pose a lot of challenges. This is just a brief 1-minute clip from someone interacting from OpenAI using this model too. This version is not out yet. They're going to slowly upgrade it during the summer, but I fully expect it to be available this fall. And so we can see this.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Rocky. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm awesome. Listen, I got some huge news.
Oh, do tell. I'm all ears.
Well, in a few minutes, I'm going to be interviewing at OpenAI. Have you heard of them?
OpenAI? Huh? Sounds vaguely familiar. Kidding, of course. That's incredible, Rocky. What kind of interview?
Well, it's for a software engineering role, but I just need to know, do I look presentable, professional?
Well, Rocky, you definitely have the I've been coding all night look down, which could actually work in your favor. Maybe just run a hand through your hair or lean into the mad genius vibe. Your
Well,
enthusiasm is what's really going to shine through.
I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to throw this on. What do you think?
Oh, Rocky, that's quite a statement piece. I mean, you'll definitely stand out, though maybe not in the way you're hoping for an interview.
Okay, I got it. I got it.
So yeah, very uncomfortable. Scarlett Johansson, who voiced the AI in Her, the film, just released a statement too that OpenAI had tried to approach her originally to do this voice. I think this just came out today, and she refused. And as you can hear from that clip too, it sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson, so she's quite upset. So the other part about this that's very confusing is the GPT-4o model is now available in ChatGPT for free, but the live streaming and audio is not going to come online until a little bit later this summer. So they're going to slowly be rolling this out and upgrading it over time. And that I think poses some different challenges too, because just like when we looked at the free version of ChatGPT, what happened was people looked at it, they started interacting with it. They were not very impressed with the free version of it too, and they didn't dig any deeper than that. Since this is now going to eventually replace that, I think it's going to be very challenging for some of our faculty and some of our colleagues to sort of accept this here too. From my own perspective too, as a teacher in the classroom, I have no idea what this is going to do for FERPA or privacy issues. But this is where we are, and this is where things are leading very quickly. And OpenAI is not the only developer doing this. We also had some major announcements from Google as well. They announced similar updates with Gemini with a model called Project Astra. It is just like GPT 4.0. It uses live audio and streaming too, and it uses Google's Gemini model to power it through. And this has some profound implications for privacy, autonomy, and how we envision learning in digital spaces moving forward. I'll just show you this brief clip that they did for their demo too, so you guys can see it. I'll turn on the captioning as well. But these live demos are something else.
Okay, let's do some tests. Tell me when you see something that makes sound.
I see a speaker, which makes sound.
What is that part of the speaker called?
That is the tweeter. It produces high-frequency sounds.
Give me a creative alliteration about these.
Creative crayons color cheerfully. They certainly craft colorful creations.
What does that part of the code do?
This code defines encryption and decryption functions. It seems to use AES-CBC encryption to encode and decode data based on a key and an initialization vector, IV.
I'm going to stop right there. That's where my sort of heart started racing too, because having someone's device just walking around live, looking at other people's screens and having the AI read off the screen too, is definitely some challenges to privacy, as we can see too. That's a security encryption she's reading off of the actual screen too, for actually making things secure, and the AI is just going into it. So we really are going to have our work cut out for us this fall to think about what this is like in our classrooms, especially if one of our students has this and pulls out their cell phone, even if they're in a small group discussion or if they're taking a proctored assessment in some way, shape, or form, which they shouldn't have cell phones to begin with. But I do think this is going to be a new step in the AI ladder of things we're going to have to worry about and think about. So with all this in mind, we came together last year in May, about this time in 2023, realizing that AI was really beginning to accelerate quickly throughout everything in education, and faculty were kind of left not knowing what to do. We were left in a faculty development stance, not knowing what to do either too. So I pitched the idea of kind of reevaluating how we're doing professional development. Traditional professional development in most higher education is usually through Centers for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Sometimes it's through academic innovation groups or individual departments. Usually we can try to catch faculty at lunchtime, buy them a meal too, and sit them down. That sort of framework was really not going to work with AI because it was just too complicated. So the whole idea is we wanted to focus on applied AI and how this was changing, not just writing as a skill too, but other skills too. So we designed an institute with curriculum to train faculty in critical AI literacy to help them navigate the changing nature of what it means to teach and learn in this new digital age. We started our first one back in June of 2023. It was a day and a half long, and we had 23 faculty members from across disciplines that taught writing as part of their actual teaching. And we were able to redo that institute in the winter of 2024 in January. And we went from a day and a half to 3 full days and invited faculty from all other disciplines to join. We went from having 23 faculty members to over 60 faculty members over that 3-day time period. So the sort of design of the institute and the structure of it is that it's in person. We want to invite faculty members who are AI early adopters and also AI skeptics to sit across from each other and talk about this for an extended period of time. We do some Zoom follow-ups with them, but we believe that first initial training too in person is really important to get them there together in the same room. We were able to offer stipends for writing faculty to produce a deliverable related to AI and teaching. We wanted them to go back to their actual classes to revamp how they're actually looking at teaching and learning using these different tools. And we will then be publishing a lot of those projects on our blog here during this next year. I think we've got about 16 lined up so far to do so. I try to keep it as immersive, up to date, and hands-on with AI tools as possible. As you've just seen with this PowerPoint too, I've had to update things radically. It took me quite a few weeks that first institute in June to design everything. By the time we got the Winter Institute up and running too, I was only able to reuse about 20% of the curriculum from that. And now we're redesigning that Winter Institute that was launched in January for our third institute here in August. And I think I'm going to be lucky if I can keep about 20% of that for this going forward. It just changes so radically. But we have committed to open source the curriculum, so anyone may use it. That is on the email that you all will receive to, and each day that you click on the link to will have curriculum for faculty to use these tools and explore different use cases. I hope it's up to date. But the big thing we're trying to talk about is both teaching our faculty and our students basic AI literacy and critical AI literacy too. These are not new tools. It builds upon existing media literacy too, and starts thinking about how we're using these tools in our digital spaces and what they mean. So basic AI literacy talks about the ability to know and understand what AI is and apply it and evaluate the criteria too. We get into the ethics aspect of it too, is where we start thinking about more critical AI literacy. So that's going to explore challenge with the accuracy, bias, ethics, agency, privacy. I mentioned and showed you the OpenAI demo, which you guys all watched, that had the very feminine voice, almost a little too friendly feminine voice. It was actually made fun of the Daily Show. I don't have that clip with me too, but you can search through it online about them making fun of the OpenAI announcement. It was very spot on because it is, in my opinion and others' opinions too, very much so designed to please a male audience. This technology is a lot like clay. When you get down to the brass tacks, you can make it do anything you want. So we really do have to think about how these tools are being built and how they're being published for our different audiences as well too. So writing still does have value in this time. This is a tweet from Greg Brockman. He's the co-founder of OpenAI, and this was from February of this year. And he says, it's fun to be writing something in a rapid cycle of feeling confused, figuring it out, feeling confused on a new problem, then figuring it out two, and often finding new insights on earlier problems. Yes, it's fascinating that the actual co-founder of OpenAI does not use AI to help him write. It actually looks at writing as a tool for learning. So absolutely, writing and other skills will remain crucial for learning. I think we all know that. I hope our students know this too. That is going to become a challenge for us to begin to advocate for this, I think. Writing to learn is definitely something that is going to remain on everyone's radar as a tool and use case for our students to use to report their actual learning, especially reflective writing. It is not foolproof from AI though, I can tell you this right now. I had 3 students in my last class use it for their final reflections in the class, even though they knew that was not a use case that was appropriate for using AI. So it is going to be a challenge to work with those students too, and really advocate why writing to learn and report learning and knowledge is going to be important for them too. When we talk about writing to report knowledge, we talk about writing for an exam or a test or a research paper. That is going to become increasingly challenging to do without involving AI in some way, shape, or form. And it's not just in the actual writing part of this too, and I'll get to that in just a second. But it's important to note and realize that actually AI should theoretically fall under existing regulations already within the US about governing EdTech tools. This is from Teach AI's AI Guidance for Schools Toolkit. It is linked in the PowerPoint, which you guys will have opportunity to look at. But we all know about FERPA for the most part in higher education, but there are lots of other existing regulations too that AI falls under. For FERPA, obviously the student data needs to be correctly organized and kept within the educational institution. That's probably not going to happen if individual students are walking around with cell phones with live video going into AI. We don't really know how we can actually stop that because that's students actually using this with free tools without banning cell phones, which faculty do have that prerogative to do if they'd like to do that for their classes. But it is going to cause us to have more guidance in terms of our CIOs and other administration too, about what tools they want to turn on or not turn on to make sure that they are FERPA compliant. There's also COPA, which is about students under the age of 13 requiring parental consent to actually have different data tools like personalized learning tools or AI chatbots turned on to collect their data. That goes into the IDEA Act and the 504 Act too, about not denying students disabilities with these different tools. I think the one thing that these tools have done is kind of skirt that with the experimental label that they get published with. They basically get to say that they don't have to be compliant with this because they are all listed as experimental so far. I don't want to accept that. I don't think we should accept that either. And of course, there's SIPA, which aligns with harmful content too. Though if you're dealing with a bot that is programmed to be a certain gender and a way of gendering things too, we don't know how that harmful content will actually work. So, one second here. Yeah, the links are all, I've got a chat, I'm sorry, too, from Jill. The links are all going to be in the Google Doc. There's a link to the main slide share in there as well, too, in the chat that's earlier. I appreciate that. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. So we want to start thinking about not just the idealized ways that OpenAI and Google are sort of like marketing these tools. We really want to start thinking about how our students are being sold these different AI tools and use cases right now through social media. And this is going to make your blood pressure kind of raise a little bit. So I apologize in advance, but it's important to know this because it's not just writing assistance that's being sold to students or even generative AI tools like ChatGPT. It's going well beyond that. There are now dozens of third-party apps selling selling a variety of generative AI tools to students right now. Most pitches are geared towards saving time or offloading work. Many students don't understand what AI means outside of ChatGPT, so they're deeply confused when they come across some of these tools that make these really wild promises. And students increasingly will come across these apps on social media very quickly. So we're going to show you a few of these. This is Olivia Dunn. She is a LSU gymnast. She's also the highest paid female name, image, likeness athlete in the country. She earns millions of dollars through social media through ads like these. And this is an ad for Cactus AI. And it's an API tool that is using OpenAI's plugin to basically sell students a writing aid. You can see from the very part, it says, need to get my creativity flowing for an essay due at midnight.
What you looking for? We got what you looking for. What you looking for? We got what you looking for. What you looking for? We got what you looking for.
And that is very much so the sort of prototype for how a lot of these influencers work. It's very quick, it's very fast. It's selling the app to and having usually someone who's very young, often female, often white, often traditionally attractive, trying to sell these different products to students. So that's writing assistants. We all know about that through ChatGPT, but there are also apps out here that sell reading assistants as well. One of them that's really big is called Unriddle AI, and it uses what's called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, to summarize documents. You can summarize it in your reading level. If you want to summarize it at an 8th grade reading level for a college level reading whatever artifact you want to look at, it will do it for you. It could obviously help students explore vast amounts of information, and those students also that require reading assistance could also be very helped out by this and form new connections and even synthesize information. But it's marketed as a tool to offload close reading, which is really worrisome to me too, because I think reading is more foundational in my opinion than writing is to actually learning. So this is an influencer on TikTok who goes by My Legal Era. She's a Berkeley law student. I think she's in her 2nd year. And here she is advertising Unriddle AI.
I know we hate spending hours to do research for a paper worth literally 10% of your grade, so I have a hack for you. Using Unriddle, you can upload as many documents as you want, and the AI will summarize for you. You can also ask it questions that it'll answer based on your text. It can also simplify really complicated topics, and you can start writing your assignment directly next to your research. If you ever get stuck, you can use the ++ function to generate the next sentence or give you ideas on what to write about. Now you can spend more time writing and editing and less reading research.
Less reading research, more writing. Okay, all right. Some things are being missing here, right? We're being sold a tool that's going to help us in one sense, but we're not really thinking about what might be lost in that process. And really, that's what we're going to be doing with this third iteration of the AI Institute, and using these different examples as starting off points about how Reading Assistant could obviously help students in need, but we need to add a little bit more of intentional friction on our part, theoretically, if we're going to be teaching. Now, friction isn't a bad thing, right? It's not about making an assignment harder. And in this case, for reading, it could be assigning a reading using physical pen and paper and teaching close annotation. You could do the digital version of this using perusal or hypothesis as well. In this case, what I mean by friction is just slowing things down a little bit and ensuring that if AI is being used, it's being used to help augment the actual student's learning and not completely offload it, which is what I would say is happening here in a lot of these ads. So that's with reading. It's not just with reading, though. It's also with note-taking and lecture. TurboLearn is a really big one that's marketing both on Instagram and TikTok. It uses augmented speech recognition, or ASR, to capture live lecture or speech. And it can automate notes by then uploading that summary of the actual lecture, and create quizzes and flashcards. Of course, just like with the reading assistants, this could be really helpful for those students to do so. I wish you guys would have access to this right now during my actual talk, so you guys could then sit down and look at a summary and go through it, because you already have critical and close listening skills and note-taking skills. But if you note the lazy sales pitch, I've never listened to a single lecture. So a lot's going on here too when they sell these different use cases to students too. They're basically selling the fact too that the AI is smart. It's not, it's just predictive. They're also selling the AI is going to be able to capture everyone's speech accurately. It's not, it's still going to make errors. If you are dealing with a speaker who is not, speaking with a certain accent, or if you're dealing with someone who is speaking at a low volume and your microphone's not picking it up, it's not going to do that work for you. When we talk about friction in this, we might talk about the fact too that we would stop actually just doing an entire class with lecture and switch over to do some small group work or some intentional sorts of discussion too, where this type of tool would not be useful to completely offload that labor of learning, of close listening and note-taking. It's also in research, and I think many of us are aware of the different research tools that are available too. One that I used before too was ASSETT, that is very good, but it can automate entire literature reviews. We also have one here too that's called ProDream AI. That's one of the many sites that claim to cite real sources for AI-generated text. Many people will talk about the free version of ChatGPT just making up information. There are tons of now API apps that are designed to get around that. Of course, automated literature reviews can help parse through more arguments that a human reader can ever possibly go through, and might even enrich your research. But that misses the point of a literature review in the first place. But you're supposed to actually read and process it yourself, right? And actually put that into words for your actual audience. So we should be encouraging students to read what other scholars argue, not offload the process entirely.
How to create a literature review using AI. Go to ProDream.ai. Make an outline with your prompt. Use citation search to find sources for your paper. Dissect information from our scholarly database. Copy and paste, then use AI Copilot to paraphrase quotes. Expand on each source to refine your lit review by holding on Shift, and the AI continues writing in your voice.
The AI continues writing in your voice. Oh boy, okay. Big problems with this, obviously. If you're allowing AI to research for you too, you're obviously not doing the work of it. But more importantly, you're also putting this amazing amount of trust in a system that is known to produce errors. And what really concerns me too about a lot of these third-party apps is that they're not in any way, shape, or form regulated, that from anything that I could see too. They're just selling this to students. And a lot of these are selling this to K through 12 students as well too, not just our college students. So the other big one that I think a lot of people are not aware of is we're seeing increasingly in STEM fields, especially in math classes, students using AI to scan questions. The big one that a lot of influencers are using is Answers AI. It uses multimodal AI, probably GPT vision, which can actually use your camera to scan things and upload that directly to the AI to produce answers. Now, obviously, this could be helpful. Students with disabilities or other learning challenges could use this to be helpful too. I would love to have this tool at a conference and be handed a piece of paper where I could then scan it and actually interact with it. But unfortunately, if we've seen a theme so far with the sales pitches.
This app has been a lifesaver helping me catch up with my schoolwork since I've been out with a concussion. All you need to do with this app is just take a picture of your question, send it to the app, and use AI to get the most efficient answer. Also, it's not just giving you the answers. This app also gives you an explanation, so it's genuinely helping me learn. It's gonna help me catch up on my work, and for that one class with that one teacher that doesn't know how to teach, you know who you are. I can finally understand what you're supposed to be teaching now. Woo! And now you can too. Just download Answer AI.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, it's good that Ashley's recovered from her concussion to produce these wonderful TikTok videos selling this stuff. I think we could all be glad about that. But a few things are going on here. Number one, almost all the different types of AI tools that are out there too, for right now, again, this is just what we know today, are really bad at generalizing math questions. They sort of top out around 60 to 70% about answering questions too. So a lot of the actual commentary on the TikToks are like, I tried to use this for my math exam and I failed because the AI isn't really useful for that. But we're also getting more into the weeds here too of these arguments, is that students don't view this as cheating. They view it as a tutoring tool, which I would challenge this. If I ever had a chance to sit down and talk with Ashley, I would say, well, what are you actually learning from this? Let's sort of unpack that. Let's sort of think about this. Because that is what we're seeing too. And a lot of them feel like they're not learning from their traditional teachers, which is another sort of sales pitch that we're seeing from a lot of these AI companies. And that's really what we're trying to push back on, that AI is not a tool that's going to solve learning. Learning is not broken. It doesn't need to be fixed by AI, just like writing doesn't need to be fixed by AI either. But that's kind of what the field is from these different influencers. And of course, that is one of the reasons why we rushed to AI detection as quickly as we could. Unfortunately, that's not worked out as well as we had liked. So last year, about this time, OpenAI announced they were going to shut down their AI detection tool, which was called the text classifier, because of too many false positives. Then all throughout of 2023, we saw Turnitin's AI detector be adopted really rapidly by institutions, many of whom have now since shut it off. They've shut off for a variety of reasons. They've done so because of cost, because of too many false positives, and also false negatives too. This is a running list of universities that had turned it on and have now shut it off. And it is growing. I don't think it's growing by the day, but I think it is growing the more that people are talking about these unreliable AI detectors in practice. This is from Vanderbilt's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning from last fall, when they made the decision to turn off Turnitin's AI detector. At that time, Turnitin had published that their detector only had a 1% false positive rate. And just to put that in context, what Vanderbilt was dealing with, they had 75,000 papers submitted in 2022. With a 1% false positive rate, they would still have to deal with 750 student papers that would be incorrectly labeled as having some form of it written with AI. That 1% number has been challenged by a lot of different institutions too. Some people are saying it's as high as 4, others much higher than that. And this is just for main papers. It doesn't include discussion posts, reflective journals, or other types of material that people upload onto a learning management system. So from this, right now, at least, all AI detection is currently unreliable in these contexts. Doesn't mean that you can't use it, but you need to be very much so aware of the fact that they have a very high false positive rate too, and make sure you keep that in mind if you are turning this on at your institution and looking at it. We also know that there's some bias in AI detectors because, again, all AI detectors use AI to try to catch AI. And we've had quite a bit of research about them being biased against non-native English speakers. And the students with lower perplexity are often misflagged. Those include students with disabilities and also students who are unprepared. GPT-0 was also one of the big AI detection companies that came on very quickly on the scene when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. GPT-0 is not any better than Turnitin or any of the other AI detectors too. They often misflag material too, in this case, the Constitution. On the left is OpenAI's text classifier when it was still available. I got a screenshot. I uploaded the Constitution there. It correctly identified it as being very unlikely AI generated, while on the right, GPT-0 misidentified the Constitution as being written entirely by AI. Well, the reason why is that it's all based on predictive material and perplexity of prose. A group written document like the Constitution is not going to have a very high perplexity rate, right? A lot of the times when we ask our students to write in so-called white standardized academic English, that does to some degree really reduce the amount of perplexity some students have when they actually write on top of things. So it's something to keep in mind. But this has led to faculty being very frustrated and different educators being frustrated too, and leading to prompt poisoning. So some people are using Trojan horses that they insert into their assignment prompts to try to catch students using AI. We would like to try to avoid this because this is a form of deceptive assessment. It's not technically an ethical practice because you want to be informing your students what type of materials you're trying to test for and why, so that everything is on the up and up.
You've never heard of using a Trojan horse in your essay prompt? This might just be the trick to help you identify AI-generated essays in your classroom. On my page, I've mentioned a few different things that don't work in terms of identifying AI, but this hack is pretty clever and can show you exactly what to look for without the use of any software or special programs. The term Trojan horse comes from Greek mythology, and it's basically a metaphor for hiding a secret weapon to defeat your opponent. In this case, the opponent is plagiarism. Let me show you what I mean. So I split my essay prompt into 2 paragraphs because I'm going to enter my Trojan horse at the end of the first paragraph. You can write whatever you want here. Just make sure you change the font color to white and make the font size teeny tiny. So if this essay prompt is copied and pasted directly into ChatGPT, you can then just search for your Trojan horse when the essay is submitted.
So one of the areas I have with this is that it's not just deceptive assessment, but if I was using a screen reader or something else and I was a freshman student in a freshman writing class, which are many of my students who I teach, I don't know if I would have the wherewithal to say, this is someone planning a Trojan horse to try to catch me. This is just Mr. Watkins being really weird, asking me to write about the word banana or Frankenstein in my essay. So that's something to kind of think about too, is that even out of frustration too, we don't want to sort of fray the actual relationships with our students even more. But that's definitely the sort of landscape that we're seeing right now too. So the latest thing that Google just announced that's been talked about for quite some time in different circles is watermarking texts. So watermarking is different in terms of AI detection because it happens at the source. So the actual AI model itself, in this case, this is Google's Gemini, uses cryptography to actually mark the text at its source. And the screenshot here is an example of SynthID, and that's what Google's using here too. To mark not only AI-generated text, but their generative music, their images and video with cryptography. And in theory, it's pretty hard to break because you can copy and paste different sentences and the cryptography will still hold with it. So that's the main theory of it. But then when we get into how it's actually used in practice, this is where it becomes kind of a big problem. There's no universal standard, meaning every company has to adopt their own cryptography with their own key. So if I'm trying to catch someone writing with Google, I have to then upload it to Google's actual cryptography service, in this case, SynthID. If OpenAI commits to this, which they have not done so yet, you'd have to upload that to their version of it too, and so on and so forth. And the big problem is it's going to be really easy to break. So I could take Google's version of this, which you see here, text, and I could open it, go to OpenAI and just say, rewrite this using GPT-4 Omni, or even one of the new open models that's free on the market too. And it would break the cryptography just by asking the AI to rewrite it for it too. So it's not an end-all solution itself. It is a step in the right direction though, and it might one day be part of the overall solution of trying to identify what is AI-generated content, not just in our classes, but you can see this too It's going to be in music. It's going to be images and videos as well too. That has some profound implications for disinformation and misinformation online as well. The other thing is too, just like with the AI detector, is that AI detector models that came out, there was no real clear ethical guidelines for how to use this in academic misconduct cases. You can see here too, down below at the very bottom of the image, it says probability of being watermarked 99.9%. It's still a probability that the watermarking's there. If this does get out there in practice and you start uploading student work, writing in there too, even if the student is on the up and up and doing their work and citing sources, some of those sources might have material that's been watermarked, and it might actually appear in this too if they're actually citing sources that way. So it's going to be something we're going to have to really think about how we'd like to integrate this into teaching and learning as we go forward. Luckily, some very smart people are thinking about this. One of those people is Dr. Sarah Lane Eaton. She teaches at the University of Calgary, and she released last year the ethical principles for detecting AI-generated text in student work. And it is, I think, a really good guideline to start with. And as she says here too, she talks about she's not a fan of using detection tools. Neither am I, trying to identify text written by generative AI because it's very unreliable. But if you're going to use them, try to use these guidelines to do so ethically and transparently. Want to avoid all types of covert or deceptive use of any kind of detection tools, because that's obviously antithetical to assessing student work with integrity. So if we expect our students to act with integrity, we also, as educators, must model that ethical behavior ourselves. We can start with a big policy check too with our institutions to see if they've actually adopted an official AI detector, whether that's Turnitin or GPT-0. I think CopyLeaks is another one. You do not want to be using a third-party detector your institution has not contracted with too, because you are uploading student data to that. And you want to make sure that you have a contract in place with them. Then you obviously want to check with your department head or supervisor to ensure that they have no objections to use of detective tools in student assessment. You want to clearly outline this on your syllabus of what detection tools you're using and why you're using them, and be honest about this. You don't want to be deceptive about those too. And above all, you want to have a conversation with your students too, and be open and honest about what you're using and why you're using it too, and why you feel like using any type of detection model too is important for their learning. So just be upfront and clear about it. Okay, so let's just do a brief recap here about why things matter. So we are in a period of acceleration with these tools. So generative AI is moving at a fantastic clip right now. ChatGPT is just one example of that. There's many more out there too. They're going to pose new opportunities and challenges for learning across the board. We really do want to start thinking about what this means, not just for our assessments, but for learning itself, and what parts of these tools we want to incorporate to actually help students learn, and what parts of these tools we want to protect students from offloading their learning to or becoming unskilled. We want to adopt a sort of model of transparency across the board. We want our students to be transparent when they're using these tools. We want ourselves to be transparent about it too. One thing I did not mention in this PowerPoint that's been all the rage these past few months is a lot of faculty have adopted AI to do feedback and automatically grading student work. Sometimes they're not telling students that AI is actually grading their material for them. That's, again, something that's pretty deceptive. And if we want our students to act ethically, we want them to be open and transparent about too. We need to model that behavior as well too for them. I think we really do need to rethink about professional development too. What you guys are doing right now is an example of that. Coming together, talking with each other too, thinking about how this is changing, and really looking at learning itself within your disciplines is going to be something you're going to have multiple conversations about moving forward for a long time. And I think this goes beyond just what we're doing in the classroom. It has to be done at the institutional level with strategic planning. And we're going to have to consider what teaching and learning is going to look like 5 to 10 years down the road and plan accordingly. I have no idea what that means now when students can pull out their phone and have a voice that they change and set to their own sort of standard, providing them not only an answer to a question, but emotional support for that question too, which is just beyond me. So we did have a chance to pilot some different tools, and I'll kind of end talking about these results that we had too. We started a framework about 4 months before ChatGPT was launched using the predecessor of these tools called GPT-3 with different types of assessments with students. And we were really lucky to come together as a department and even as a university to begin to start to think about how this would actually impact learning and get a snapshot of how students were using it. So we now have gone over 4 semesters collecting data from different students and different pilots about these programs. I think we have over 80,000 words of students reflecting on their use of AI. And everything that's been pointed to the fact that they are very cautious adopters of generative AI when you teach them AI literacy, when you give them a chance to look at what these tools can offer them, but also what they might take from them too in terms of the skills they might have. Most students prefer to continue writing naturally versus fully adopting text generation when we launched this in that fall of 2023. And that is something to, I'm sorry, in the fall of 2022. But we were able to help establish a framework for integrating these tools, trying to demystify them with our students and build some generative AI literacy with them as well. And the praxis we came up with is known as DEAR for the acronym, because of course you're in academia, you got to have a good acronym for something. And this is ours. We're going to talk about clearly defining the stages of a project, whether that's a writing project or anything about this too, a reading project, or if they're going to use something that's going to record their notes. And we want to think about those different stages in the student learning outcomes of that project too. So that's from the teacher side. Also from the teacher side is we want to evaluate if those tools we're using too are actually covered under existing regulations, if it's actually appropriate to pair that for the learning activity to help augment that student's learning, or if that's going to de-skill them in some way. So that's from the faculty standard, the define and evaluate stage. Once we deploy it from the student's perspective, we want to encourage students to explore that specific AI technology and do so without fear that they're going to be in trouble for doing so. We want them to think about if this is actually going to help them learn, if this is going to be something that they don't want to use moving forward, because it might be something that would end up actually costing them some really needed skills going forward too. And that's the last part of our praxis, which is giving them ample space to reflect on that. And it's also the most important one. So reflection on most all types of learning outcomes, especially in our DEAR praxis, is going to be essential on these different levels too. Writers and also users of the technology are going to want to understand how the tool works from the perspective as both its utility and the goals of a writing project. Again, we tested this in writing too. We're now beyond that into learning. We tested for brainstorming, for counter arguments, and we asked them all these different questions about the different tools during this time too, and what it was doing for them, or what it was possibly doing instead of in lieu of their learning. So that's the goals of this actual praxis too, and it can be adapted to any type of learning outcome too, beyond just writing as well. It does take time though for the faculty member to be able to explore what those tools are and really just to be aware of these different use cases that are out there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a minute. I can go ahead and show you guys some tools if you want, at least one tool that if you guys would like to see that, or we can open this up to questions from the audience. I will let you guys decide where you want to go.
So, tools? Tools? Okay.
Okay, tools it is. Okay. All right, so let me reshare my screen here. I think we've got time to go in depth with one tool, and this is on the actual Google Sheet that I sent out to. It's called Lex, and Lex is a writing assistant. It's built like a normal sort of Google Docs or Microsoft Word Online, but it's got AI integrated in it. And it's built from the perspective, the developer is a writer, so he's not looking at this as something that's going to completely offload the labor of learning. And it's got some really useful tools built into it to actually help you as a teacher begin to examine what that writing is. So I'm going to go and share my screen. We'll look at Lex here real quick. Let me go pull up Lex. There we go. And I'll share my screen. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys can see this. It should say this is a test piece about AI literacy. So this is Lex. It's free for the actual sort of base model of it too. To upgrade, you can pay about $5 or $10 a month to access some of the more advanced models. You can write in this just normally like you would for any type of piece of writing, but you can also call upon AI assistants. And the one thing that I really love about Lex and that I sort of like sell to my faculty too of why it's really helpful is that this actually has a way for the writer to identify what was written by AI just so they can keep track of it. And you can go up here at the very top where it says show AI written text, and you click on the little eyeball up here, and it makes the AI written text glow blue. So it's really easy for the writer themselves to actually just look at this because, again, I'm not trying to police my students on this too. When I ask them to reflect on a project, I just want them to go back and start thinking about what you wrote versus what the AI wrote. And if they're working on a piece of writing that they're working on for maybe a week or 2 weeks, it's not going to be something that's easy for them to discern where the AI actually wrote something or didn't. But again, like I said before too, for the research that we had, most students did not use it to actually write material with it too. They used it for feedback. And so what was really popular was you could take a sentence or a short little paragraph here, and you could go over, highlight it and go over to Ask Lex. And you can say, what are some counter arguments? Or ways you can rewrite this, any ways that you could ask Lex, and it will give you some feedback briefly on that material. And this is using, I think, GPT-4 Turbo. It's giving some ideas of counter arguments. And so the framework I would release this to students is that if you're going to use any one of these ideas, you need to obviously attribute that AI gave you this idea and integrate that properly into your actual draft as you go forward with it. So I can withdraw the actual comment that way. He also had some pieces here too about title ideas. So after students wrote the rough draft, they can click on this and get some more different title ideas based off the content of their material too. And they can obviously generate more of them here. Again, carefully, if we integrate this into class, what I would do is we would stop after they would do this. They would look at the different titles and we would say, all right, let's go through these one by one. Let's talk about them. Let's think about what makes a good title versus a bad title. Again, we want friction in this. That was so quick, me just clicking that button. I don't want my students just integrating that off the top of their head in their draft. I want them to think about this and pause about that. That's where this becomes more or less intentional. And of course, we also have feedback. I'll click on the blue one again so you guys can see this. I did leave a little stinker here at the bottom here that I wrote by hand. So the Earth is flat, supported by a series of turtles. Well, I hate to disappoint the flat earthers out there too, but it's not actually flat. It's not supported by a series of turtles. The reason why I did this is because sometimes we get student writing that is got some really weird ideas, right? Like if this student had submitted this to me and they had that as part of an outline, I would go over to my colleague behind me. It's like, I don't know if the student's making a joke or something or what's going on, but someone wrote this in here too. And you can actually get AI feedback on the entire draft using Lex. Let me click off the blue button here. And we can see sometimes it will pick up off that incongruous idea, right? So if you click on here too and say, ask Lex, you can get feedback on the entire draft. And we'll see if it picks up on the fact that the Earth is actually not supported by turtles. All right, so it's going to start and do the whole draft. Pretty generic feedback, right? But it's going through this. And it's going through point by point. Now let's see if it finds out about the issues with, the Earth is flat. There we go. So it's still doing it. So I'll stop here. So yes, this line appears to be misplaced or humorous filler. If it's intended as humor, it might distract from the seriousness of the topic. If it's an error, removing it will maintain your professional tone in your piece. Pretty simple, generic feedback, but can be very helpful for students that way too. And so all these different things that you're seeing here too can be shared with me since I have a Lex account and my students have a Lex account. They just go up to the share button here at the top. And they can share via edit link, but this is this one at the very bottom. And then I can see all the different edits that they've made in their draft. And I think that is an important skill if you want to teach students how to use AI effectively in their writing or just getting them to explore this, that interfaces like Lex are really good way of doing so outside of ChatGPT. Because ChatGPT, you can't really edit the material within it too. You have to download it. You have to then go into it as well. It doesn't invite you in as a writer. And we're seeing this now with Microsoft Word upgrading it too with AI, and also Google Docs Help Me Write feature. But that is one really good example of a tool that has a lot of different use cases that you can use using Lex. I'll stop sharing there too. So I know it's a lot to go through, but what questions, concerns, or rotten fruit do you have to digitally throw at me? Because I feel like that sometimes happens at this point.
Go ahead, Teresa.
My question is, you mentioned that your students have an account with Lex. Is that something that you ask them to buy as part of their coursework?
Yeah, it's free for them for right now. I don't ask them to buy anything. And the other thing that's a very good question about this in terms of privacy, and we didn't really think about this the very first run through or very first pilot. We did our second pilot now, is that we would like our students to sign up with a secondary Gmail account for all this stuff and not use their primary Gmail accounts. Gmail accounts are free themselves, but if that is the case and they're going to use this for writing tools, we don't want whatever company they're using, even Google itself, to be scraping that information from their primary account. This tool came out long before I was even officially aware that all these different regulations existed too, because it was, to me, mind-blowing to me that this exists. And the actual developers working now to make this as compliant as possible with education. Lots of other tools are doing this quickly as well. It's not always clear what can be done. But I tell my students when they work with any of these AI tools, whether it's OpenAI, Google, or Lex, you do not want to be uploading anything private in here too, or anything that would be revealing your own identity. I don't even ask my students to put their names on their drafts when they upload this to Lex too. It's something to do that. It's something to think about. And then I think Rebecca has a question here too. So Rebecca says, thank you so much for this amazing workshop. I noticed you're trying the scaffolded activity with first having students write their own summary of an academic article. Love that idea. Their writing first is the way I would go with this. Then using AI to write the summary for them, then use explain paper or SciSpace to help them reword sections of the article they find difficult based on your recent chapter with reflection questions at 2 AI stages about what they're losing out on or how the AI tools hinder them. You have a great idea here, Rebecca. This is awesome. So your question is, how have you handled critical conversations in the classroom about the marketing? When at the top SciSpace it says 2 hours of work, yep, reading in minutes. Do you just bring the marketing to the classroom to discuss the critiques like you showed it to us? What else have you tried? So I don't know in Colorado if you have the same situation we have in Mississippi, but the Mississippi legislature actually banned TikTok earlier this year for us. So I cannot actually pull up TikTok on my overhead to show the marketing. I have to go to my home computer, download the TikToks, put that into a PowerPoint like I've just showed you now too, then upload that PowerPoint. And that's how I show it to my students. My students, when I talk about my aggravation at this, they say, well, why don't you just turn off your data plan on your phone and do it that way? Well, I'm teaching you all right now from the computer. I can't turn off my data plan and use that way. So I do. I try to demystify them with this tool and say, look, this is the selling point. It's not going to do that for you too. Let's demystify this a little bit. Explain paper and SciSpace are really great reading assistants. They can offer students, especially those that have reading disabilities or are learning a new language, wonderful support. But the idea that they're just going to take that and run with it is not something I want my students to do. I want them to carefully and cautiously adopt this and think about it. Many students are not going to do that. Many students, when you show them the tool, especially the reading assistant for the first time, my students' responses were, great, I don't have to do any reading ever again. And what I said to my students, when they said this to me in class, I said, okay, let's unpack that for a minute. Let's just stop for a second. What happens when I, as your teacher, take that same attitude when you submit your draft? What would happen instead of me reading your actual essay? I just load it up into Explain Paper or SciSpace or another AI reading assistant tool and just give myself a quick summary of it. And they were shocked. They said, you can't do that. That's against the law, one of them said. I said, well, there's no law. There's no law. There's no even policy about this because it's happened so quickly. What is the relationship you want me to use this technology with you? We have to be thinking about this now. And you all have to be thinking about this as students going forward, because when you graduate from here too, you want to be able to advocate for yourself if your boss is using this technology in a way you find unethical or of a way that's not accurate to you. If you have a boss who's asking you to use one of these AI tools that are going to use massive amounts of information and go through this and only pay you, 35-40% of what a normal rate would be for that job, or demand that you work 3 times or 4 times as hard using AI otherwise, you want to be AI literate enough to say that's actually not what's going to happen with these tools. That's just some of the actual marketing. And you want to be able to train your students to be able to have those conversations. It doesn't always work.
Thank you so much. So helpful.
Yeah, and we've got another question from the audience.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great. Early in your presentation, you were talking about how students perceive these tools when you showed and that they see it as a tutor. And I was wondering where you drew that from, because I've had some anecdotal experience myself, but I'm wondering if you do that from some research or more from anecdotal experience.
It's anecdotal.
What's
It's not research right now. It's really anecdotal from what we're seeing on social media. And it's also when I was talking with students, when they started talking about the very first pilot I did with the tools, and way back in October of 2022, they were very adamant that they are not going to use this for writing in any way, shape, or form after this class. You've done a great job, Mr. Watkins. Then in the reflections, they say, but I use it in my math class all the time. It just teaches me these concepts that I don't understand. And I was sort of taken aback by that. And with sitting down with students too, is like, yeah, this is the greatest tutoring sort of tool I've ever had. And we just had information that came out right before I logged on to do this webinar with you today. Mingo, which is Khan Academy's tool for education, just announced a partnership with Microsoft, and they're going to make that completely free for educators now going forward. And that tool's marketing from Khan Academy is as a personalized tutor for students and also as a teaching assistant for teachers. The big thing that was on my mind too when I was putting together this presentation was OpenAI's demo and Google's demo, the new version of these tools, GPT-4o and Google Astra. Even Saul Khan was there in the demo too with his son, having it tutoring him on a math problem. So I think that is where the marketing's headed. I haven't had the research yet to actually show that because, again, this is just happening so quickly.
I ask you, it seems like if that's true, that's the huge cognitive literacy for students we're trying to bridge, right? Of the difference between it being the tutor to when it just branches into you didn't inform me like they're all different. That seems like a major cognitive leap to address.
Yeah, it's I got half the part of that last question. I'm sorry. I faded out a little bit.
It was more of a reflection, like, is that maybe the big cognitive leap of the difference between when it's truly being a tutor versus doing it for them, and they're just umbrellaing the whole thing in that. But to discern the gray area in between, that's like the big AI literacy advancement for students. If that's true, then that's where a big leap can happen.
Yeah, my personal feeling is that it's the simulation of being tutored, not the actual experience of being tutored. It's very different than actually having a human being understand you, talk with you, and go through this. But they've gone so far to make that simulation be as real as possible that it kind of messes with our sense of reality of what's going on. And part of the AI literacy is talking with students is like, well, look, this could really be helpful for you. You might actually use this to help you through a math problem. That isn't going to be the same thing, though, as going to a 45-minute appointment one-on-one with a writing center tutor that's going to work through your actual process for a paper and talk to you. It's probably not going to be the same thing if you go to a math tutor that is 30 or 45 minutes either. At least I hope not. If it is, then I think we're in some deeper water here than I want to admit.
All right. Mark, thank you so much for staying on a little bit longer. We really appreciate your thoughts and your honesty and how students are really using, how some students are using these tools, I should say. Can we give Mark a round of applause?
Thank you all. This has been great.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so we are at 1:32 right now. We're at break.